Today, we're going to talk about Absolute Comics. So recently, we've seen DC release their first issues of their Absolute comic universe they're about to start up, being Absolute Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman being the first three. Today, I just got and read through Superman issue 1, and today I'm finally here to discuss everything I think about this introduction into this new world they're about to throw us into, and the different takes and adaptations they have on Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman, and possibly the rest of this universe going forward. So if you're interested in what I have to say, stay with me and get right into it. Roll it.
You're now watching The Captain.
So the Absolute universe of people that are just hearing about this is something that's very akin to the Ultimate universe from Marvel Comics. It's supposed to be a lot more grounded and be somewhat of pseudo-realism, to the vein of if you were to think about how superheroes would exist in modern day, in your personal reality. If you were walking outside, this is what they would look like, and this is how it would make the most sense realistically. It makes the heroes a little bit more grounded. It takes out some of the wackiness with it, and it's a good formula that works. Again, we've seen it with the Ultimate comics with Spider-Man originally, and all the different heroes in that Ultimate line of things that they spun off outside of that, and how successful that was. This, I feel like, is a great start to a potential industry-changing thing. Now, and me saying that, I don't think it's going to reinvent how comics are made or anything of the sort, but this does have potential to be extremely popular with casual fans, long-term fans, and everyone alike. And this could be the most popular comic line out to date at the moment, because you're already playing into the popularity of the big three of DC being Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman to start with, and they're putting an interesting spin on them. So to start with Batman, first and foremost, I think that was the first one out of the three that come out. They're doing interesting things in regards to switching up the origins of their big three characters, and for what I see outside of them, the rest of the universe as well. With Batman, an interesting thing they did to make him more realistic is to change up his origin story and where his roots are. So if you're familiar with Batman, you know the whole story of him being a rich billionaire, playboy philanthropist, and having parents who were billionaires and owned Wayne Industries. And they went out to see a play, ended up getting mugged and murdered, and that created the whole thing of Batman. In this story in particular, they switched it up from, instead of his family, the Waynes, being a billionaire family with all this old money and all this stuff that sets Batman up to be high tech and everything going forward, they're very rooted and grounded. You find out throughout the issue that Bruce Wayne is relatively middle class in all things regarded. His father is a school teacher for what looks like to be like middle to elementary school age kids, and his mother is a social worker. So they are far from the rich billionaires that they were in the origin story that we've seen over and over and over again. I think that alone makes things a little bit more interesting, and because this Batman isn't going to have the same access to all the incredibly expensive high-tech weaponry that we're traditionally known to see Batman to have just off rip, because he didn't have the funds to create these things or to purchase these things. Secondly, we see that his father was then murdered by a random shooter within this zoo that they had. He had the school field trip and he was murdered there, which again sends him down the loop and the path of being Batman. So that's relatively the same. But another interesting factor in the murders is that his mother is alive. It's just his father that died that sent him into being the path of Batman. So I feel like his mother is going to be a significant player going forward, or at least a significant plot device used to make him develop further and further. I don't know how they're going to use it, but it's an interesting thing they kept around, and an interesting domino that could fall in a very cool way. But outside of that, I want to talk about how this character grew to become the Batman. Something that was interesting that I found in this is that he doesn't go off to travel the world and learn all the mysticism and things of that nature and find the League of Shadows like you would normally see with Batman, but he takes on martial arts and perfects his own style from a bunch of different other styles. Similar, it's a little similar to original Batman, but he's a lot more self-made in this version. But even before that, he was a college athlete, a great football player, and for whatever reason faked his injury and sought to be a protector of Gotham. After coming out of college football and faking that injury and whatnot, he started to train, and on top of the physical training, he took on different jobs that were instrumental into the foundation of the city of Gotham. He worked within construction, building all the different parts of Gotham, understanding how the buildings worked. He worked within the sewer areas of not construction, but you guys know what I mean. I don't know how the exact jobs in particular, but I guess plumbing of the city city, for lack of a better term. And he also worked within like the mayoral office to kind of learn the politics of how Gotham operates. So he literally learned every single thing there is to know about his city and how it operates. So now when you have a Batman who seems to just know his city a lot more, you don't have the whole thing in the original version of Batman where it's just, oh, I've lived here for a long time, so I know how the city works. No, he's been on the ground, inside and out of every part of Gotham and making everything work there. And I find that a very, very interesting and a really dope way to go about the character going forward. Now, besides the development and the upbringing of him being Batman, there is the weaponry. I have to talk about the weaponry there. Because again, like I mentioned before, he doesn't have the super high-tech armor and Batmobile and all that things that you would associate with the regular Batman. He's a lot more self-made. But one thing that does not change from this Batman to the next, he's incredibly intelligent. He's an engineering genius, and he's very good at engineering different mechanical weaponry within his own suit. So he's a lot more self-made. Like I said before, he built everything on his suit, as far as we know now. Maybe we'll find out later on in other issues that he had assistance from other people, but it's under my assumption that he built his entire suit from scratch now. And this is another aspect that I'm going to discuss with each of the three first issues. But with this one in particular, his suit. A lot of people had interesting things to say about his suit, at least in the different forums, in the Facebook groups and things like that I'm in, that I noticed. It seemed a little bulky because him in general, he seems a lot more bulkier, which again is very similar to the Ultimate comic, so it draws a little bit more of a comparison there. Because if you've read a lot of or seen a lot of the Ultimate comic artwork, like with Captain America, him having like 17 abs and having this very much like action figure-y proportioned body, you see that a lot with this Batman. And with his suit is a lot more like armor-like and kind of like pieced together. It's not as smooth or like one big battle suit that you would be normally accustomed to seeing with Batman. But the thing that I enjoy about this, because it did grow on me. I wasn't sure how I felt about it originally, but the thing I love about it now is that every piece of this suit that he built is functional in a certain type of way. From the ears on the cowl being different knives, being the batarangs that he throws around, to the cape itself being a protective shield, which we've seen before. But it's something new that I've seen with this version is that they act like bat wing hands. So people, if you've seen bats in actual real life or seen them in zoos or even in National Geographic and whatnot, you know that bats walk on their hands. They don't walk on their feet traditionally. They use their feet, but they're usually using their hands to kind of balance themselves out. So he kind of uses this cape almost in like a whip-like fashion, and also in a way where he can kind of walk around, similar kind of to like Spider-Man, I guess. If you've seen the Spider-Man Iron Spider armor, where he kind of walks around, he uses it in a very similar fashion. That's something that I found very, very interesting about this version of Batman. And I guess the big clickbaity thing that everybody's talked about up to this point is the bat signal. In the comics, we're used to seeing that bat signal being possibly a batarang if you're thinking about like the Matt Reeves version of Batman in the movies, or you've seen it be just a tactic that Batman uses to where he wants to draw people's attention to that his armor to shoot there more, it's more padded. But this version has that bat signal, or that bat symbol, I'm sorry, is an actual like top of an axe. So you see him grab like the handle of an axe, flip that to the bat signal or the bat symbol on his chest, and turn that into a literal mini axe that he uses to chop somebody's hand off. And this version of Batman is a lot more violent and gritty than what you're used to seeing, because like I said before, he cut somebody's hand off, and even besides that, it was very, very aggressive in his ways of scaring all the other villains that you find in this first issue. I don't want to give away too many details on the books because I do want you guys to go read them for yourselves. I'm not going to give in-depth spoilers for that. If you guys want me to cover each issue as it comes out, I can kind of do what I did with my Marvel Blood Hunt video, which you can find right here. Editor, please put it somewhere right here, where I covered that entire series from front to back. If you want to see me covered in a similar style, you can see it there. But I digress. Going forward, he's very interesting in how he's built up throughout the story. One more significant, interesting thing that's going to kind of play in with the other books as well is that not just this Batman has a new like backstory, the side characters that are important to this character's development are also different. Alfred Pennyworth in this is somebody who we're used to seeing be associated with the military in the comics, being MI6 or different branches of the English government. But in this one in particular, he's some sort of like secret agent slash mercenary slash assassin who's been sent to Gotham to deal with the problem and ends up having to deal with Batman as well. So he's not the butt butler that serves Batman. It seems like he's still going to play some kind of a mentor role to Batman throughout the book, but it's not going to be what we're accustomed to seeing. And I find it very interesting, different. Again, this is the big thing with this whole run of Absolute Comics. It's different than what the norm is. It's going to be really refreshing how things move going forward. All in all, I thought the first issue of Absolute Batman was really solid and really interesting. I really had a lot of fun reading this, and that really got me excited to read the next book that came out that I read, being Absolute Wonder Woman. Okay, very similarly to how I felt about Batman in regards to the origin change up, that applies to this version of Wonder Woman as well. This version of Wonder Woman is still very similar to her original version, like with Batman. She is still an Amazon. She still is a daughter of a Amazon queen. But the difference is, for whatever reason, we don't know yet, the Greek gods felt it fit to take Diana from her mother and from all the Amazons and place her into what essentially is hell in Greek mythology. And she is then raised by the witch Circe. So that off rip is something incredibly interesting because she doesn't have the typical pride and the love for being an Amazon that you would normally see in her. Because traditionally, she's very similar to somebody like Vegeta, who has the pride of her culture and the pride of her people on her back, and she wears that on her sleeve. In this one, she has pride of being an Amazon, but she doesn't really know what it means to be an Amazon per se. Even further and more interesting than the fact that she was removed from the Amazons and put into hell, the gods told Circe that she was not allowed to utter the word Amazon at all ever again to Diana, or period. The word is just banished and no one can say that word anymore. So we see Circe essentially, do the whole typical thing where she doesn't really care for her at first, but then decides to raise this child as her own. So we see Diana being raised by a witch within hell, still having the strength of an Amazon and all the things that come with her being a demigod essentially. She's also cultivating skills in magic and all kinds of other forms of sorcery. So we're seeing our traditional Wonder Woman, but she's being like super boosted by a lot of the witch powers that she's getting from being trained and taught and raised by Circe. So we finally transitioned into her having her full build and her full armor and her just getting to be in action. It's incredibly sick. Now, differences in her armor versus Batman. Now, every piece of her armor isn't functional. Obviously, she has superpowers, so it doesn't have to be, but her aesthetic is just a lot more dark and serious and just gritty in my opinion. And it's something that I adore. I think this is the best Wonder Woman has ever looked in comics, in my personal opinion. She has the cool tattoos. I love the black and red design that they're kind of going for with her. And I love the kind of creative spin on the way her weapons look as well. Like she still has a lasso. I don't believe it's the lasso of truth per se, or maybe it works kind of similar to it, or maybe it's the exact same thing, but it's now like a bright red. If you guys have watched, or if you're a fan of Star Wars whatsoever, the way that like a cracked kyber crystal looks, so like Kylo Ren's saber from those movies, where it's kind of like violent and kind of thrashing around, that's what the lasso looks like now. It looks like a stream of like energy, like a light whip, but it's very violent. It's not as like beautiful and graceful as the weapons that she had before that seemed like heavenly. Everything that she uses seems like it's just literally from hell, literally, which mostly is. And then the biggest thing, no pun intended, is her sword. Again, in the comics, we've seen her use these elegant blades that were like more akin to like a Spartan sword. It's like a short sword, all that good stuff. She now wields this like massive buster blade. It's really similar to like the blade that Guts holds in the Berserk series, like Cloud has in the Kingdom Hearts series. It's just this big ass hunk of metal. And I love that. It's just so cool to see her tote this thing around. And even cooler is that she doesn't have to wear it on her back. She literally pulls it from like a pocket dimension and pulls the entire blade out. And I just love that. Whenever y'all know me, I know me with swords. Like, again, you can see the swords in the back here. I love swords. So seeing her pull this massive sword out was just, yeah, that sold it for me. I'm not gonna lie. In regards to seeing her aesthetic in the cover art before I even read the book, I was like, yeah, I have to read this because she looks badass holding that massive ass buster sword. But yeah, she used that sword and she wields a lot of other magical abilities we see her utilizing this first issue. But like I said before, outside of that stuff, she seems relatively the same in regards to her character. I mean, I want to make sure that's a big thing that people know as well going into these 3 issues, that each of these characters somewhat seem to have very similar like core morals and principles of them as characters, so they're not lost. Like Batman isn't really like on a murder spree. Wonder Woman isn't like pure evil. She's still very prideful and very compassionate. And Superman is, we're going to get into him in a second as well. But I think these characters remain who they are at their core, which will keep in a lot of the OG fans that know these characters from their own verses growing up. But they're just different and badass enough that these new fans and younger people can really attach to these characters and just the way they look, and they're a little bit more updated. Moving into the third adapted character in this big 3 run that we've gotten so far, being Absolute Superman issue 1. Absolute Superman in his entry is very interesting. I will say it's not going to be as action-packed as the first issue of Absolute Batman or the first issue of Absolute Wonder Woman, because it has to introduce a little bit more information in regards to Krypton. Because we know that within the DC universe, Krypton and the way that works is very instrumental in a lot of the big astral threats that come into play. So however they go about adapting that planet and how things work with him is how you're going to see a lot of things change around with villains like Darkseid or Abomination. Who am I thinking about? Oh my God, Doomsday. I'm sorry, I had a whole blank for a second. Characters like Doomsday making an appearance because they're all really attached to Krypton and how that stuff works and how it's perceived throughout the DC history in that universe, whatever it is. This version of Krypton, though, is very interesting. We open up to Superman kind of monologuing about Krypton, and you're made aware that things are still somewhat the same in Krypton in regards to it being a technological marvel and society being advanced and all that good stuff. And all the scientists are doing these great things and making these great advancements in harvesting the resources and all that good stuff. But then you're given the curveball that Superman tells you that his father and his mother are not scientists in the traditional sense. Because again, traditionally Superman and his family are known as being part of this prestigious house of scientists. Jor-El is a scientist who foresaw the destruction of Krypton and did all this cool stuff and yada, 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 got his son ejected off into a pod as a baby, sent to Earth. All that's cool. In this particular version, although his parents are not scientists, we are shown that they are very, very intellectual and very smart in their different ways. We see Laura, his mother, is still very much intellectual in the form of her working on a what almost looks like maybe like a crop duster or maybe something to pick crops with on this planet. I'm not really sure how Kryptonian agriculture works, but she's shown to be very much engineering savvy. Like that's her form of intelligence, her form of education. And we're told that she was also very intelligent and was destined to be a scientist in this class of great scientists. Because keep in mind, scientists on Krypton in this version are perceived to be these very intelligent people who are really prestigious. Like they are the rich people. Like in this world, people like Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg, like they are in kind of real life, they'd be like this upper 1% of everybody else. Like it's really just these smart people who rule everything, and then there are working class people. We are told that Laura as well as Jor-El had opportunities to be in that class because they were both really intelligent, but because they spoke up against the way things were, the status quo as far as the science, and it was them overindulging in the planet's resources, sucking it dry. And his perception that they kept overindulging in all the natural resources that Krypton had. With his mother, it was more so issues with the way things were and how the scientists, for whatever reason on this planet, weren't interested in putting a lot of money into space exploration. She wanted to be a scientist, which is kind of weird to me that this advanced society that can do all this stuff with their planet wouldn't want to go out and venture into space. But yeah, there's a lot of parallels between real life and that if you understand where we are in the state of politics in this point in time. But we're not going to get into all that. We're going to stick with fun fantasy and comics here. But like I mentioned before, to wrap a long story short, his parents are scientists who were kicked out of their potential tracks, and now they're forced to be blue collar workers. Another interesting thing about the Krypton society that I want to get into, because I know you guys probably aren't really interested in the way the society is formed or the way it operates, but the society in Krypton at this point is perceived to be a system where you're either a scientist, like I mentioned before, or that 1%, or you a blue collar worker who are they're kind of perceived as men of steel. So that whole man of steel persona comes from that. All the blue collar workers wear the House of L Superman S on their chest. So that thing you see there, it seems as far as I understand now, it's not just attached to Clark's family, but the working class of Krypton. They all have that. The miners, the janitors, everybody that works in that, you're a plumber, they all have this S to identify that they're of the blue collar working class. So we still get that whole subplot of Krypton being blown up for whatever reason. Again, you see Jor-El kind of get more insight into why things are going on there, but y'all can just know, long story short, that Krypton is indeed going to blow up, and we're going to see it, and it's going to be because of a lot of the over harvesting of resources of the planet, like I mentioned before. That's all juxtaposed to a scene in the far future where Clark is in the planet of Earth, and he's in, I think, Brazil, and he's in this country where he's amongst these workers who are, again, this migrant poor laborers who are taken advantage of and made to be working in dangerous conditions for the lowest possible wage. So again, very similar to his own people who were blue collar workers and farmers and all that other stuff, where they weren't given their proper due in regards to how much they were getting paid and resources and all that good stuff. So he probably feels a lot more akin to these people as he did with his other planet. Another interesting thing about that, before I move on further, you find out at the end of the book that Clark is a older child, like before the destruction of Krypton was going on. He at least is shown to be in the book at the end to be like maybe like probably between like 6, maybe 7 years old. And we're cutting to him years later now, where he's probably like a young man, maybe in his early 20s now. And he essentially helps out this town of migrant workers by helping them fix their conditions in the mines and all that good stuff. The details of it it's a lot of blood diamond stuff, so I don't need to give you the details on how that works. I don't want to bore you. But moving forward into who he is fighting, we finally do get some action in this stuff. He is fighting it's a company known as the Lazarus Corp, or the Lazarus Corporation, and they have foot soldiers who are known as peacemakers here. So they have the peacemaker design from the DC show of the character that John Cena plays. So you'll see the helmets, the red and the logo and all that good stuff, but they're working for the Lazarus Corporation, who are, again, if you're familiar with DC Comics, you know that Lazarus is associated with the League of Assassins. So I'm really interested to see how these two things co-align, and maybe if Ra's al Ghul is going to be a part of Superman's story and his origin story, or at least one of his main villains instead. It's again, the switch that they're doing here with villains and who's main villains is going to be really interesting there. And then I'm really excited to talk about the powers and abilities of Superman as well, because again, he gets into a fight with the Peacemaker Corps, and the way his abilities seem to work are very traditional to how you would normally perceive them in DC Comics in regards to super strength, super speed, and his heat vision. But something rather interesting is in his suit. His suit, for whatever reason, seems to be alive and has this sentient AI within it, almost similar to Jarvis with Iron Man. His suit, which is perceived and seen by a random soldier who we find out later is Lois Lane, because in this one she is a military soldier for Lazarus. She sees and says that the suit is adapting to the different dangers that Clark is in. So it's like shifting and maybe changing colors or changing itself to be most conducive to Clark's survival and him being the best possible version of him possible, which is very interesting. We've never seen Superman, at least in a crazy tech developed suit like this. We've seen different armors that he's been in, and even in stuff like Doomsday, where he had this black and white suit that was meant to absorb sun rays at a higher level to allow him to recover a little bit faster. Besides those things, we haven't seen him in a suit quite like this before, at least from my knowledge. If you have, let me know in the comments below. I'm not hip to the game. I don't know ball. But besides the way the suit works, it's very interesting as well. The design of the suit is very dope to me. This is probably the thing that made me want to read the Superman the most in regards to how things work for him. His suit is very much so in the same color scheme, similarly to the Doomsday black and white suit, but instead of being black and white, it's black and red, and it's a lot of fiery looking magma that's on the gauntlets and on the boots of the suit. And that probably goes into, I guess, the Kryptonian technology, because we're told earlier in the book that the Kryptonians have harvested the power of the red sun for their technology, as well as the volcanoes and the magma and lava of the planet to maximize their technology and their production. So this is the pinnacle of Kryptonian technology in the absolute universe. So the suit looks dope as hell. It looks dope as hell to me. When I imagine a Superman suit, and I know his power comes from a yellow sun, it just makes sense for it to be fiery and have that kind of effect on it. It looks really dope to me. And then beyond that, we find out that throughout the fight, because we're seeing him kind of fight and save people and yada, 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 we find out that Clark has this interesting thing about him that seems to be different than how we're kind of accustomed to seeing Superman, to where he doesn't really have control of his abilities per se, because he goes to use his heat vision in a big blast to destroy a chopper and destroy the forces that are fighting him. And the suit tells him, hey, you probably don't want to use your abilities in this way because you don't have full control over them. Or at least he was about to say the word control before Clark just blurted out laser beams and fried everybody. So it seems that he has a very, very much so different level of control of his abilities, because he wasn't, at least to my knowledge, from the time age gap we're seeing, he wasn't raised on Earth as a baby. So maybe the abilities of the Yellow Sun are a newer thing to him per se, or maybe this version of Superman is just going to be stronger than versions we're used to seeing in the past due to the factor of he has this uncontrollable energy and power within him that the suit helps him regulate. But yeah, man, all in all, that version of Superman was kind of cool. The first issue was interesting if you're a big nerd and want to see a lot of how Krypton runs. But if you're just a casual fan and you wanted to see Superman kick ass, you get that to a brief extent. But I promise you, from what I saw out of this first issue, we're going to see some dope stuff from this version of Superman. And if you guys know me and have watched me in different platforms I've been on, whether it be my podcast, the Then and Now podcast, which you can find linked to my channel here on the main page, or just different places I've been on, you know that I'm not the biggest fan of Superman as a character. I feel like there are kind of different issues in regards to how he is at his core, being just this super goody two shoes, and how he's just this unmovable, unstoppable force sometimes. I don't really enjoy it in the way he's written a lot of times. This version of Superman feels like he's going to have a lot more layers and depth to him than I'm really used to seeing before. Again, there are different iterations of stories that I've seen him in where he looks cool in regards to the Kingdom Come run and things like that, or maybe the Injustice stuff where he's evil or maybe just morally in different directions per se. This version of Superman seems to be very much so in line with a lot of the core values that the traditional Superman has in regards to protecting people, but it seems like he's going to have a lot more layers to him in regards to how he sees society and how he sees people, because the whole big, I guess, idea and theme of this first issue and of this Superman that even the suit recognizes is that you can't save people from themselves. So in this instance, in regards to the planet of Earth saving itself from itself with all the different war and destruction and the over harvesting of resources and things like that. We saw it on Krypton. Now we're seeing it here. And as far as Superman saying in the issue, he's seen it a couple different places. So it's interesting. Again, I wrap all that to say up these different versions of these characters are very different from the norm. They look dope. It kind of reminds me of the Black Label stuff with way back when that DC did, where they were trying to make their comics a lot darker and grittier. And like one of the issues, I think we saw Batman butt cheeks because they were showing like borderline nudity at one point, I believe. So we're getting that like dark, gritty feel from these books, but it's still staying very much so core to what made these characters popular to their respective fan bases. I think this has potential to be the biggest thing in comics right now that is out. And people are already talking about it. I know we have Absolute Green Lantern on the way, which I am excited to see. I know I'm a Green Lantern fan. And I want to see more what this universe has to offer, because if they can do this thing right and this can rival the Ultimate Universe that Marvel had, I think this has a chance to be really dope and potentially could lead to a lot of dope content in the future, whether that be through video games, movies, possibly with the way things are working now with DC and the way James Gunn is leading things, and most definitely television shows, animated or live action. It has a lot of potential. Because we saw how the Ultimate Universe pretty much spawned the MCU and a lot of the things that they're doing over there. If this is successful and does well, I can see this being very, very profitable for not just the comic book side of things, but for all the different things that DC wants to have their hands in regards to their characters. Because on top of that too, they don't have as many restrictions on the ownership of their characters that Marvel has with stuff like Spider-Man going on or the X-Men for a long time. But yeah, man, y'all let me know what y'all think about the first 3 issues of these books down below in the comments. If I'm wrong, y'all don't like my opinions, it's cool, but let me know what you think. Again, this has been Captain Diesel of Captain Diesel's Dojo, and I will see you guys next time. Please, before you leave, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share the video with people if you really want to see more of this content and more of me discuss these dope things. I'd appreciate it. Again, I will see you guys next time. Peace.